We're going to be talking today about section 3.5, writing ratios and proportions. We're also going to talk about 3.6, using cross products to solve proportions. So let's start with 3.5. As you've learned about ratios in past years, you know that a ratio uses division to compare two quantities. So I know that most of the time 8th graders want to look at a fraction and just see it as a fraction, 1 over 2, but this is really division, and that's why a ratio uses division, although you might not realize it. There are three ways that you can write a ratio. So you would read the ratio of A to B, and you could write it this way, A to B. You could also write that as A to B, or finally A to B. They would all be read the same way out loud, although they would be written differently. All ratios should be written in simplest form. So if you have a fraction, you should reduce that fraction. So let's look at our first example. A volleyball team plays 14 home matches and 10 away matches. Find the ratio of home matches to away matches. So it clearly says home first. So if I'm going to write this as a fraction, my home matches should go in my numerator, and my away matches should go in my denominator. There is no need for you to write the words out. I just want you to see where it's coming from. Because my home matches are 14 and my away matches are 10, I need to have 14 in the numerator and 10 in the denominator. Otherwise, I wouldn't be mimicking the order in which they've asked me the question. Hopefully, you've realized that this answer is not in simplest form, and I said right here, all ratios should be. So I can reduce that to get 7 over 5. Again, you could also write that as 7 to 5 or 7 to 5. The next question builds on the first, and let's find the ratio of home matches to all matches. So, again, home would go first, and I know the number of home matches is 14. The all matches, well, 14 were home and 10 were away, then the number of all matches that the volleyball team had would have been 24. Again, it's not reduced, so I'm going to simplify that as 7 over 12, or 7 to 12. Likewise, you could have written that 7 to 12, or 7 to 12. I would have accepted either. The next thing we're going to talk about is how we can use ratios as a proportion, or put ratios together to have a proportion. A proportion is an equation, you can tell that from my equal sign, that states that two ratios are equivalent. So the ratio of 11 to 6 is equivalent to x to 30. So if I rewrite my original proportion, 11 over 6 equals x over 30, I can look at this as an equation. I've got my equal sign here, and if I want to solve to get x by itself, I should try to eliminate 30. Well, the inverse of dividing by 30 would be to multiply. So what I could do is take, let me write this here in black, pick a different color. I could take each side and multiply them by 30. Of course, that would be 30 over 1. So on the right-hand side of my equation, I would just be left with x. In the right-hand side of my equation, I would have, I misspoke again, the left-hand side, 30 times 11 over 6. Well, hopefully you realize that 30 and 6 have common factors of 6. 6 goes into 30 5 times. It goes into 6 once. 5 times 11 would give me 55. So I have solved for x using the same logic that I have used to solve my equations by using inverse operations. When looking at a word problem, there are multiple ways that I can set up a proportion and do so correctly. So let's consider the following problem. A recipe for tomato salsa calls for 30 tomatoes to make 12 pints of salsa. How many tomatoes are needed to make 4 pints of salsa? So if we look, we have a smaller recipe and the normal recipe. If we fill in our, using this kind of setup here, the smaller recipe, I don't know how many tomatoes. That's what I'm looking to find. But I know that I need to find out how many to make 4 pints. The original problem tells me that I need 30 tomatoes to make 12 pints. I could set up that proportion by saying x is to 30 as 4 is to 12 and comparing my tomatoes and pints. And I can solve this to get that x is equal to 10 pints. Another way to look at the same problem, so I'm going to keep the problem on the screen, is to simply put your smaller recipe and your normal recipe up here and my tomatoes and pints on the left-hand side. So the number of tomatoes for the smaller recipe, again, that's still what I'm trying to find. For the normal recipe, I need 30 tomatoes. Number of pints for my smaller recipe, that would be 4. And for the normal recipe, that would be 12. So x over 4 is equal to 30 over 12. Solving it this way would still give me the same answer of 10 pints. Another piece of helpful information when looking at proportions is to use cross products. The cross product is the product of the numerator of one ratio and the denominator of another ratio. The cross products property tells us that the cross products of a proportion are equal. So let's do an example. If I take the fraction 1/2, an equivalent fraction we should know would be 5/10. The cross products here would be 2 and 5 and 1 and 10. Well, 2 times 5 is 10 and 1 times 10 is 10. Algebraically, if I gave you an example just using variables, a over b is equal to c over d. So b and d could not equal 0. If they were 0, then that would be undefined. If that's the case, then I can multiply AD, and that would be equal to BC. I know last year a lot of you circled your cross products. I'm going to pick a highlighter, if I can find it up here. I can't, so we'll just circle AD and BC. Alright, so looking at my proportion. My cross products, the first step is going to write my original proportion. 8 over x is equal to 6 over 15. The cross product property tells me that 6 times x would be equal to 8 times 15. I'm going to pick up my calculator, and I've got 8 times 15 is equal to 120. I want to divide by 6, and I'm going to get x is equal to 20. So that would be my solution. To check my work, I'm going to substitute 20 in for x, and let's scroll up so we can pull our original problem. 8 over 20 is equal to 6 over 15. So 6 times 20 should be equal to 8 times 15. And on both sides, I am going to get 120. We're going to pick up with the rest of 3.6 on the next video. Thanks.